$175 million. That was the price of admission to acquire a demographic goldmine. Deep within the server architecture of JPMorgan Chase, the largest, most powerfully insulated financial institution on the planet, an automated marketing email was dispatched. It was a standard operation, a welcome message sent to a random sample of 400,000 young digitally native customers acquired in a highly celebrated corporate buyout. The bank's executives expected a predictable influx of new account openings. Instead, the servers returned an anomaly. A cascade of error codes flooded the system. Undeliverable, address not found, mailbox does not exist. Of the 400,000 emails sent, over 70% instantly bounced back into the void. Out of the vast ocean of acquired users, exactly 103 people opened the message. In a matter of milliseconds, a terrifying mathematical reality materialized in the executive suites. The users did not exist. The data was a phantom. How does a global banking titan, equipped with armies of elite analysts and infinite resources, purchase a tech company for 9 figures without verifying if the core product is real? How did a young entrepreneur completely bypass the financial immune system of Wall Street? To comprehend the pathology of this collapse, we must first examine the environment that allowed the infection to spread. The modern banking sector is engaged in a silent, high-stakes demographic war. Legacy banks are terrified of aging out. They're desperate to capture the lifetime value of Generation Z and Millennials before nimble, digital-first financial tech companies swallow them whole. In the banking industry, the supreme metric of survival is customer acquisition cost. Think of customer acquisition cost as the price a casino pays to bring a gambler through the doors. They might offer a free hotel room, complimentary drinks, and concert tickets. If the casino spends $500 in marketing to bring in a player who only loses $50 at the tables, the casino bleeds capital. For a bank, finding a cheap, reliable pipeline of young customers who will eventually need checking accounts, credit cards, auto loans, and mortgages is the absolute holy grail. Enter Frank. Founded in 2016 by a charismatic, highly educated visionary named Charlie Javice, Frank was positioned as the Amazon for higher education. Javice understood that the United States federal student aid application, known as the FAFSA, is a notoriously complex, bureaucratic nightmare for millions of families. Frank offered a streamlined digital interface that promised to process these critical applications in minutes, cutting through the red tape of the government. The pitch was intoxicating. By positioning herself as a champion for struggling students, Javice became a darling of the financial media. She secured a spot on the coveted Forbes Under 30 list. She projected an aura of hyper-competence, claiming that Frank had amassed a staggering user base of over 4.25 million students. For the executive board at JPMorgan Chase, this was not just a startup, it was an unmined gold deposit. Over 4 million highly educated individuals, all about to enter the workforce, all primed to become lifelong Chase customers. It was the perfect strategic acquisition. Javice was offering to lower the bank's customer acquisition cost to near zero. But the glossy magazine covers and the polished venture capital pitch decks concealed a profound structural necrosis. The pathology of this collapse is rooted in a phenomenon we can call data alchemy. When JPMorgan initiated the acquisition process, they naturally requested proof of the massive user base. This is the absolute cornerstone of corporate mergers: due diligence. Due diligence is supposed to act as an impenetrable financial firewall. It is the equivalent of demanding a full-body MRI, a psychiatric evaluation, and a deep blood panel before an underwriter issues a billion-dollar life insurance policy. You do not simply take the patient's word that they feel perfectly fine. But Charlie Javice understood a critical loophole in the system: data privacy laws. When the banking executives demanded the raw data to verify the user base, Javice deployed a brilliant defensive shield. She cited strict federal student privacy regulations, claiming she could not legally hand over the unredacted personal information of 4 million college students. This created a massive blind spot for JPMorgan's analysts. The reality was far darker. Frank did not have 4.25 million users. Internal records would later reveal they had fewer than 300,000, a deficit of nearly 4 million digital souls. When the bank insisted on seeing a redacted list to verify the scale of the company before transferring the funds, the startup was cornered. Admitting the truth would evaporate the $175 million payout instantly. So a synthetic reality was engineered. The mechanics of the fraud were shockingly calculated. Javice first approached Frank's director of engineering, Patrick Vovor, instructing him to artificially inflate the customer database. Vovor recognized the immense legal toxicity of the request and flatly refused to participate in the deception. Denied by her own internal engineering team, Javice was forced to outsource the illusion. She reached out to an external data science professor. The directive was clinical and precise: generate a massive, mathematically plausible database of fake users. They needed names, physical addresses, dates of birth, and college affiliations that looked entirely organic to the untrained eye. For a fee of just $18,000, the professor utilized basic algorithms to synthesize over 4 million individuals. Think of synthetic data as high-quality counterfeit currency. If you hand a cashier a single counterfeit bill, they might not notice. But if you try to deposit 4 million counterfeit bills into a Federal Reserve vault, the texture, the weight, and the serial numbers will inevitably trigger an alarm. To prevent JPMorgan from running a deep forensic scan on the counterfeit data, Javice restricted the scope of the audit. She provided the synthetic list to an agreed-upon third-party validator. This validator did not test the data for authenticity. They simply confirmed that the spreadsheet contained the requested 4.25 million rows and passed that confirmation back to JPMorgan. The bank's internal analysts, blinded by the desperation to close a demographic gap, accepted the third-party validation as absolute truth. They bypassed their own financial immune system. The disease successfully infiltrated the host. The acquisition was finalized. JPMorgan Chase paid $175 million for Frank. Charlie Javice received $21 million for her equity stake and was promised a $20 million retention bonus. She was installed as a managing director at the largest bank in America. The illusion had been completely monetized. But synthetic data holds a fatal, unavoidable flaw. It cannot generate economic energy. Illusions of this magnitude require total, airtight containment. The moment a fake asset is subjected to real-world stress, it fractures. The timeline of the crash was initiated not by a whistleblower, but by basic operational friction. When a bank acquires a list of millions of potential clients, the immediate protocol is activation. JPMorgan engineered a massive marketing campaign to welcome the Frank users into the Chase ecosystem. Anticipating this exact moment, Javice and her chief growth officer, Olivier Amar, realized their synthetic data would not survive an actual email blast. You cannot send an email to a ghost. In a frantic attempt to cover their tracks, they went to the open data market. They spent $105,000 purchasing a list of 4.5 million real college students from a commercial marketing firm. They attempted to substitute this purchased list for the Frank user base. But it was a clumsy maneuver, and the newly purchased data lacked the specific granular fields that Javice had originally promised JPMorgan. When the JPMorgan marketing department initiated the test launch to a random sample of 400,000 users, the systemic failure occurred. The 70% bounce rate was a statistical impossibility for a healthy, highly engaged tech platform. The catastrophic failure immediately triggered a forensic internal audit. JPMorgan's elite data scientists were unleashed on the Frank database. The autopsy of the data was brutal, swift, and undeniable. Investigators discovered anomalies that defied all logic. They found that exactly 1,048,576 rows in the database showed identical repetitive structural patterns. In the world of data science, that specific number is a smoking gun. It is the exact maximum row limit of older versions of Microsoft Excel. The data was not organic. It was copy-pasted in massive blocks. They traced the origins of the data back to the cheap, commercially purchased marketing lists. They uncovered the $18,000 invoice paid to the data science professor. The entire empire was effectively a digital mirage, rendering the acquisition a total, unrecoverable loss. The internal panic transformed into devastating legal action. JPMorgan Chase filed a massive federal lawsuit, completely dismantling the narrative of the visionary founder. CEO Jamie Dimon publicly declared the acquisition a massive mistake. The United States Department of Justice and the Securities and Commission Exchange moved in, dissecting the communications, the emails, and the deliberate mechanics of the fraud. During the highly publicized federal trial, the defense attempted a final, desperate maneuver. They argued that JP Morgan rushed the due diligence, that the bank was fully aware of the strict privacy laws, and that institutional executives were simply using a young founder as a scapegoat to cover up their own reckless, heavily flawed investment strategy. They claimed the bank bought a concept, not a guaranteed customer list. But the digital footprint of the fabricated spreadsheet and the testimonies of those who refused to participate were insurmountable. As the gavel fell in a Manhattan federal court, the illusion was permanently liquidated. Charlie Javice was convicted of conspiracy, wire fraud, bank fraud, and securities fraud. She was sentenced to 85 months, over 7 years in federal prison, and ordered to forfeit tens of millions of dollars. The collapse of Frank is a clinical diagnosis of the fake-it-till-you-make-it culture mutating into terminal fraud. The Forbes 30 Under 30 list, once a beacon of entrepreneurial brilliance, has increasingly become a ledger of cautionary tales, filled with young executives who believed that projecting success was a valid substitute for building it. But more critically, this autopsy reveals a devastating failure of institutional oversight. How does a financial leviathan equipped with armies of risk managers purchase a tech company for 9 figures without sending a single test email to verify if the product is real? The core reason for this failure was corporate FOMO, the fear of missing out. JP Morgan was not buying a functional software company, they were buying a narrative. They were so terrified of losing the next generation of banking customers that they actively suspended their own rigorous analytical standards. They wanted the 4 million users to exist so desperately that they simply chose not to look too closely at the underlying math. When validation becomes a mere formality rather than a skeptical investigation, a spreadsheet of ghosts can bypass a fortress of capital. It proves that no matter how sophisticated a financial institution claims to be, greed is the ultimate blind spot. The markets never forget, but they do forgive the next fraud. Subscribe to Financial Autopsy to see who falls next.